video. Enjoy. And as the theme for romance grows, you gotta have The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I cannot tell you how much I love this book. This is probably my favorite standalone out of all of these books. This and The Fault in Our Stars are probably my two favorite. Like, I love all of them, but if I had to choose two, it would be these two. Now, for those of you who don't know, and God, I wish all of you knew about this book, but The Princess Bride follows Buttercup and Wesley, and they basically fall in love. They both live on a farm together, and he is her farm boy, and she falls in love with her farm boy. So what happens is Wesley goes overseas, and Buttercup gets news that he was killed by the dread pirate Roberts. So then what happens is Buttercup gets kidnapped by Inigo Montoya, Fezzik, and Vizzini, is I believe how you pronounce all of those. Don't crucify me. But she gets kidnapped by these three guys because they want to start a war. So what happens is the dread pirate Roberts comes to find the new princess, because she is now Princess Buttercup, or will be the prince's queen. And the prince is an asshole. Excuse my language, but the prince is an asshole. You are not supposed to like him. He is not a likable character. So basically, the dread pirate Roberts follows Princess Buttercup and fights with Inigo Montoya and Fezzik and finally Vizzini until he finally gets the princess. And then they go on an adventure, and then they get separated, and she's taken back to live with the prince, and it just goes on and on from there. But of course, as all stories go, it has a happy ending. And this is one of my favorite books in the entire universe of books, because it is just so amazing. And as I said before, I'm terrible at describing things. We all know this. But I've also seen the movie for this like 4 times already, because that's what really made me fall in love with it, was the movie. Because I watched the movie first and then I read the book, which I know I usually read the book and then watch the movie, but I did it in the other way because I watched it for school in a club of mine, so that made me want to pick up the book. So I instantly went and I picked up the book from my library, and I finally have it in my hands, and I'm so happy that I have this baby in my hands, and it is my baby, and it will forever be my baby, and nobody can take that from me. So that is that. Please pick this one up as well. You won't regret it, I promise. Okay, the next book I have is The Perks of Being a Wallflower, wow, by Stephen Chbosky. And I picked this up from the library. This is my copy, but I first read it at the library because I wasn't sure if I would really like it or not. I was kind of hesitant to read it, but I fell in love with it. It was a great kind of experience to see what it's like to go through high school and what it's like for the outcast to go through high school. So this book follows Charlie throughout a bunch of his letters. They're written in letters, which I thought was pretty cool. But this book follows through Charlie's letters and show him introducing himself to sex and drugs and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's what it says on the back. And that's kind of what he's being introduced to. and he's just basically being introduced to the teenage years and the awkward high school years, because God, we all know what that's like. I'm still in high school, but awkward high school years, you'd think it'd stop at awkward middle school years, but no, never. Then you got the awkward high school years. But I really, really like this book. I don't remember like a whole lot of details about it because it's been a while since I've read this book. It's been at least a year, so I'm not very familiar with all the details, but it's definitely worth the pickup. I do remember that much. It was definitely worth the pickup. Okay, the next book I have is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Now this was also a book that I kind of went on a whim. I felt like I would like it, but I wasn't really sure, but I ended up loving it. Now, for those of you who don't know, The Book Thief is narrated by Death. And I know that's kind of a weird concept, but honestly, it kind of worked. Death follows kind of like a girl named Liesel, is I believe how you pronounce her name. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. That's how I pronounce it. Sorry if I butchered it. But she's a girl growing up in Germany during World War II. And her family is hiding a Jew named Max. So obviously, you can see where the confliction comes in with that much. Because obviously, hiding a Jew is pretty much illegal and you can be killed for it. But Liesel saves books from being burned, and she learns to read them, and she just falls in love with reading and all the words and the style and all of that. So that's basically the main concept of this story, or from what I can remember. It's kind of been a while since I read this book too, but I do remember I really, really liked it. I know, not very descriptive, but it is definitely worth the read. I know that much. Next book I have is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Now, this book, especially in recent times, is a very good example of growing up black and how black people have it harder than white people. They kind of just, the way they live is harder. I feel like I'm going to get much hate for saying that, but don't hate me. But this book follows Star Carter, who is in the car with her friend Khalil when he is shot by a police officer when he was unarmed. And what happens after that is a friend at school suggests that Khalil looked like he was armed and he had it coming. And that sets her off. And it sets her whole neighborhood off. Her neighborhood is basically just a war zone now against them and the cops, and Star is trying to figure out what she can do to stand up because she knows it's not right. She knows what happened to her friend isn't right and she can't let it go. So Star is trying to figure out what to do and how to just speak out and talk about how this isn't fair and how it's not right and how he should be punished, because nobody really gives a crap about it. It's just just a harmless shooting. It looked like he was armed. And Star can't have it that way. Star wants to figure out a way to just make it stop and prove to everyone, hey, this isn't right. What's happening isn't right. And it's not. But this is definitely a very, very powerful book. And Angie Thomas is a great writer for doing all that stuff. And it was a great, great book. And it will bring you to tears. But definitely, definitely give it a read. It's worth it. Finally, the end. We are at the last book I have to talk about today. And that is none other than Scars by Cheryl Rainfield. And I know, I've talked about this book multiple times, and that's because I love it. I love this book. This book is also my baby. These are all my babies. All my books are my babies. It's just a fact of life. You'll have to live with it. But I'm going to talk about it again in case you don't know what it's about. Scars is about this girl named Kendra who was sexually abused when she was little. And now Kendra's a little bit older, and she's starting to remember things that her abuser did, and she's starting to become scared because she's afraid her abuser's going to come back and hurt her again, because she's seeing guys on the street and she's getting threats to be told to be quiet, don't tell anyone. But she's talking to her therapist, Caroline, I believe is her name. But basically, to cope with all of it, Kendra self-harms. She cuts herself. And we all know it's not a healthy coping mechanism, but it works for Kendra. Kendra just, it stops everything in her head and it makes her feel better. And that's why she does it. But Kendra, with the help of her friend / kind of girlfriend, Megan helps her try to come to terms with her abuser and try to just finally find out who he is so she can have some peace. So she can just feel okay again. And it's not easy. This is such an emotional story, but it is written so well. It's such an emotional story between the cutting and the sexual abuse and just all of it. It turns into this huge emotional mess, but it is really, really a great story. And it's very impactful and very powerful. So there's definitely a trigger warning going into this book with self-harm and sexual abuse. But if you can get past those topics and if you can read about those topics, then this is definitely a great book to do about it. Okay, so that's it. Those are my favorite standalones. This video is way longer than I wanted it to be, but those are all my favorite standalones. And if you guys have any similar favorites, or if you guys have your own favorites, let me know. I'd love to hear about them. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys all have a great day. Bye!